You open your eyes for the first time, and the first thing you see is silver hair. Not your own. You don't have hair yet. You are approximately 3 minutes old, but everyone in the room has it. The maester, the handmaidens. Your mother, exhausted and magnificent in equal measure, silver hair everywhere, like someone spilled moonlight on the population of an entire castle. Welcome to House Targaryen, the family that has ruled the Seven Kingdoms for over a century, that survived the doom of Valyria, conquered a continent on the backs of dragons, and managed to make incest a political institution rather than a personal problem. Congratulations. You were born into this. And here's the thing. Most people in Westeros would consider this the greatest fortune imaginable. You have dragons. You have the Iron Throne. You have a dynasty so old that other dynasties feel embarrassed about their age. You have the blood of old Valyria, which sounds impressive and mostly means your hair is beautiful, and your family has a statistically concerning relationship with fire. But here's what nobody tells you before you're born into House Targaryen. The dragons are the least dangerous thing in this family. Your father is King Viserys I, a good man, a genuinely, thoroughly, almost inconveniently good man, which in a Targaryen king is roughly as useful as a particularly pleasant earthquake. He wants peace. He wants his family to love each other. He wants everyone to get along. He is going to spend the rest of his life watching none of these things happen and being surprised every single time. Your mother is Queen Aemma Arryn. She is kind and sensible and does not have silver hair, which makes her quietly suspicious to approximately half the court. She will not survive long enough for you to know her well, and this is the first lesson the world teaches you about what it means to carry Targaryen blood. The fire is in the blood. But the blood has a price. You are the second child. After Rhaenyra, who is already, at 4 years old, doing that thing she will do for the rest of her life, which is standing in rooms with an expression that says she has already decided the outcome of this situation and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. You love her. You are also slightly afraid of her. Both of these things will remain true forever. Your childhood at King's Landing is an education in the specific madness of living inside a dynasty in decline that hasn't noticed yet. The court is beautiful and paranoid in equal measure. Everyone is related to everyone else in ways that require a master and a diagram. The small council meets regularly to make decisions that your father will then be very reasonable about in ways that satisfy no one. The dragon pit is full of dragons that people treat like political statements rather than giant fire-breathing animals, which, you will come to understand, is the fundamental Targaryen error. You bond with a dragon early. This is encouraged. Your dragon is not the largest and not the most impressive, but it is yours, and the relationship you develop with it is the most honest relationship you will have at court for the next 20 years. Your dragon does not have political ambitions. Your dragon does not spread rumors. Your dragon breathes fire at things it doesn't like and is completely transparent about this process, which is more than can be said for most people at the Red Keep. You name it something sensible. The court expected something grand and Valyrian. Your dragon's name is quietly practical. This is your first public statement, though nobody realizes it. The trouble starts, as trouble always starts in this family, with succession. Your father names Rhaenyra his heir. Half the court accepts this with varying degrees of sincerity. The other half begins quietly constructing alternative futures in their heads. You watch both halves of the court with the attention of someone who has already understood, at an age when most children are concerned primarily with lunch, that the people smiling in this room are more dangerous than the people frowning. You start keeping track. Not formally. You are a child, but you have a very good memory and an instinct for patterns that manifests early as simply noticing things. Who talks to whom and when, whose expression changes when certain names are mentioned, who agrees too quickly, who never quite commits. You file it all away in the orderly archive of your mind and say nothing about it to anyone. Sir Otto Hightower is the hand of the king. He is one of those men who smiles with complete conviction while doing something you would not smile about, which is the highest form of courtly skill and also a very specific kind of exhausting to be around. You watch him the way you watch all the most dangerous people in the room, carefully, from slightly too far away to be engaged directly. His daughter Alicent is your father's companion, then his queen. This happens while your mother is barely cold, which is the sort of timing that would be considered indecent in a family that had time to consider decency. It is not indecent by Targaryen standards. Targaryen standards are their own category. You do not blame Alicent for this. Alicent is also a person who was put in a situation by people with more power than her and told to navigate it. You recognize this. You are also a person in that situation. This makes you, quietly, something closer to allies than the histories will ever capture. You tell her this once, directly, when you are 12 and she is navigating the specific social complexity of being the second queen and the mother of children who are now in line for a throne they were not supposed to be in line for. You say, "I know you didn't choose this." She looks at you for a long moment. She says nothing. But something in her expression changes. And she never quite treats you the way she treats everyone else at court. This will matter later. Most things that seem small matter later. Daemon is your uncle. Daemon Targaryen, who entered the world like someone who found the existing rules of behavior unsatisfactory and decided to simply operate without them. He is charming and dangerous and occasionally brilliant and frequently impossible, and he loves Rhaenyra with the specific intensity of someone who has never learned to love anything at a reasonable volume. He is also the most alive person in any room he enters, which at the Red Keep is a profoundly relative achievement, but still. He looks at you early on with the assessment of a man who evaluates everyone as either useful or irrelevant. You look back at him with the expression that means nothing. He grins. "You're the interesting one," he says, which from Daemon is either a compliment or a warning. "Both," you say. He laughs. The years build toward catastrophe the way years always do in this family. The politics of succession grow more complicated as Rhaenyra grows older and makes choices that the court cannot absorb gracefully. And Alicent's sons grow up with the knowledge that the throne their mother hoped for is being held by someone who would prefer they didn't exist. You watch all of this with the clarity of someone who is not directly in the line of fire and has worked hard to stay that way. But here is the thing about staying out of the line of fire in a Targaryen succession crisis. Eventually, the fire is everywhere. Eventually, there is no position that isn't a position. Eventually, you have to decide what you are, because the war will decide for you if you don't get there first. You start building your own architecture, quietly, carefully, in the spaces between the major conflicts. There are people at court who are committed to neither side. Not many, but some. Lords who have holdings that border both green and black territory. Maesters who serve information more than allegiance. Merchants whose prosperity depends on the realm's stability rather than its winner. You find them. One conversation at a time, one relationship at a time. You build nothing that looks like a faction, because a faction can be identified and countered. You build instead something that looks like a series of individual friendships and practical alliances, which from the outside resembles coincidence. From the inside, it is the most complicated thing you have ever done. Your father's health deteriorates. This is painful in the personal sense because, whatever his failures as a political strategist, he genuinely loves his family, which is an unusual quality in a king and worth preserving where possible. You spend time with him, not performing, actually there. He tells you about the dream he built his reign on, about the prince that was promised, about the things he believes are worth protecting. You listen, genuinely listen. The things he says are not useless. They are the architecture of a version of this dynasty that could have existed under different circumstances. You file them away, he dies. Of course he dies. Targaryen kings either die dramatically or gradually, and your father chose gradually, which means everyone had time to position themselves around the event before it arrived. The positioning is visible if you know where to look. Aegon II is crowned before Rhaenyra knows her father is dead. This is the move. The actual move. The entire war that follows is downstream of this single morning's work, of Otto Hightower getting his grandson crowned before the message could travel to Dragonstone. You watch it happen with the particular sensation of seeing something you anticipated arrive anyway, which is not the same as being able to stop it. The dance of the dragons begins. Fire on both sides, literal fire, because both sides have dragons. Because this family put its power in creatures, and now the creatures are being used to settle an argument about paperwork and bloodlines. You think about this sometimes, about the gap between what dragons are and what they are being used for, about whether the Valyrians who built this power ever imagined it ending in a field somewhere over the Reach with two of their own creatures killing each other. Probably they did. They were not, by all accounts, optimistic people. You do not declare for either side immediately. This is noted. Questions are asked. You answer them with complete sincerity and no information whatsoever, which is a skill that takes years to develop and is worth every hour of practice. You send private messages to both Rhaenyra and Aegon. The messages are different. Each one says, in the language of careful diplomacy, that you have concerns about the conflict, that you believe there may be a path to resolution, that you would be willing to serve as intermediary if both parties were open to it. Neither party is open to it. This was predictable. But the act of sending the messages does two things. It establishes you as someone seeking peace, which is useful regardless of the outcome. And it gives you a channel to both sides, which is more useful than either of them realizes. Rhaenyra trusts you more than she should, which is the privilege of a sister who knew you before you learned to be careful. You tell her true things. You simply do not tell her all of them. Aegon trusts you slightly less, because Aegon has the instincts of someone who was told he was important before he had reason to be, and those instincts tell him everyone is playing an angle. He is right about this. He is right about it regarding you specifically. He is simply wrong about what the angle is. The war damages both sides. This was also predictable. Wars between dragons always damage both sides because the damage is literally on fire. You watch the losses accumulate. Rhaenyra loses children. Aegon loses his dragon and then himself. The great houses of Westeros begin losing interest in the war in proportion to how much of their lands are on fire. This is your moment. Not because you plan this exact sequence. You are good, but you are not that good. But because you built something that is designed to function in exactly this kind of chaos, where the established powers are exhausted, and the realm needs someone who hasn't spent the last 3 years burning things. You call in the relationships, quietly, one by one. You present yourself not as a claimant, but as a solution. Not as someone who wants the throne, but as someone who can stabilize the situation. The distinction matters enormously to people who are tired of instability and care considerably less about lineage than they did before everything was on fire. The lords who have been waiting for a reason to stop fighting find that you are a reason, not a dramatic one, not an inspiring speech on a battlefield kind of reason, a practical, reasonable, this person seems unlikely to set anything else on fire kind of reason. Alicent is still at court. She looks at you across a room one evening when things are moving in the direction they are moving, and the expression on her face is the expression of someone who has just fully understood something they were close to understanding for a long time. You knew, she says, not from the beginning, but for years. You knew, I hoped, you say. There is a difference. She considers this. Your father would have liked you, she says. The version of Viserys who believed things could be resolved peacefully. He would have liked what you're doing. I know, you say. I've been thinking about that. You were crowned not at the Red Keep with great ceremony, but at a meeting of lords with a level of spectacle that is, by Targaryen standards, practically humble. This is intentional. The message is not power. The message is stability. After 3 years of the most expensive family argument in the history of the continent, stability is the thing people will actually stand up for. Your dragon lands in the courtyard of the Red Keep on the morning after, and does not burn anything. This is also intentional. The symbolism is not lost on anyone. Ruling is not what you expected, which is interesting because you have been preparing for it longer than most kings have been alive. The preparation covers the theory. The reality has textures the theory doesn't capture. The constant pull of competing interests. The distance between a good decision and an implementable decision. The specific loneliness of being the person in the room who is ultimately responsible for what the room decides. You think about your father more than you expected to, about the dream he held, about the things he told you toward the end, about the gap between what he wanted and what he was able to build. You build differently, not perfectly. You are not under the impression that you are building something perfect, but you build with the architecture of someone who has spent their entire life watching what doesn't work and filing it away. And that is not nothing. The realm begins to settle, slowly, unevenly, with the particular stubbornness of a place that has been unstable for long enough to forget what stable felt like. But it settles. Your dragon lives in the dragon pit. You visit it regularly. It is the only relationship in your life that requires no performance whatsoever, and you value it exactly as much as that implies. Some years later, a lord asks you, at a feast with wine involved, how you managed it, How you went from the fourth or fifth name anyone would have predicted to the one sitting in the chair. You consider the question for longer than the wine probably expected. I watched, you say finally. For a very long time, I watched everything. And I learned that the people who want power loudest are usually the ones who use it worst. And I learned that the people who no one expects are sometimes the ones the situation actually needs. And mostly I learned that patience is just preparation with better timing. The Lord nods sagely, then he drinks. You drink too. That is what it means to be a Targaryen who wins differently. You carry the blood of dragon lords and the fire of old Valyria, and a dynasty so old it has outlived its own reasons for existing. And instead of burning your way to the top, you simply waited and watched and built something so carefully that by the time anyone noticed it was built, it was already holding the ceiling up. The Targaryens conquered the world on dragon back. You conquered the succession with a filing system and a very long memory. Your father would have loved it, probably, or been slightly confused. Honestly, it could have gone either way. Subscribe, because next time we find another family that seemed powerful until we got inside the walls.